Good morning. It being 9 o'clock-ish, I'm going to officially call 10 o'clock-ish. I'm sorry. I'm on yesterday's time already. I'd like to call to order Public Works and Highways, first meeting of this biennium. And we're going to begin with Bill number 1485, an act relative to eligibility and fees for late refund requests of road tolls. And Representative Corman, please. Welcome to Public Works, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I am Tom Corman. I represent Grafton 15, which is Ward 3 of the City of Lebanon. And I'm here to introduce HB 1485. This is actually a constituent request, and the constituent who requested it is here and will be speaking. But let me give you a little bit of background, if I may. RSA 260-32 calls for an 18-cent per gallon tax for road tolls on fuel that is sold. And when I drive my car, I am, of course, using the roads, and that makes some sense that that tax goes toward maintaining our roads. However, not all fuel that is sold is for vehicles that are going to be going on roads. And therefore, there is the possibility of getting a refund for that. And you can apply for that if you have cause to. So, for example, if you're using equipment that is construction equipment that is not on the road, it's actually doing construction, you can get a refund on that. So that's all well and good. Sometimes, though, when you file for that refund, you're a little late. And RSA 260-47 allows for being allowed to file late, but only for political subdivisions within the state. So if you're a private entity and you want to file for this refund and you're late, right now, you're out of luck. So what this bill would do would be to make it so that even a private entity could file late for this refund. The bill says that if it's not a political subdivision or an agency of a political subdivision, you can file late for the refund, but there is a small penalty, right? A fee of either 5% of the amount of the refund or $50, whichever is greater, and no fee assessed to any agency of a political subdivision within the state. And the current law also says that no agency can get this waiver more than once in every 3 years, and the bill would just say nobody can get the waiver more than once in every 3 years. So it's really just a way to make it so that the general public also can file late at most once every 3 years with a small penalty. So with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Representative Jack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for appearing. Am I understanding correctly that under current law there is no penalty fee for anyone?
Well,
and so you've added that?
Under current law, only an agency of a political subdivision can even request a late refund. So no private entity can even request a late refund. And there is no fee assessed to the agency of a political subdivision currently. What this bill would do would be open up the prospect of a late request, but with the fee if you're not an agency of a political subdivision.
Any other questions? Representative Newman.
Yes, thank you. For maybe, I hope for more than just my benefit, could you give me an example of an agency for a political subdivision? And what the circumstance would be that they would have to consider this?
Yeah, so imagine that a town has some equipment that is going to be used off-road. some construction equipment or some other equipment, forestry equipment, that's going to be used off-road. And that agency is buying fuel, that agency then would request the refund because that fuel was not going to actual vehicles on the road.
Just a
Follow
quick
up.
follow-up and a quick follow-up. And there is a mechanism in place, or these agencies for political subdivisions have a way for keeping record of all of this?
I would assume so. I don't know on my own, but I would assume so because there is this mechanism for them to request the refund.
Representative Cloutier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Newman asked my question, but thank you.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for taking my question. So my question is simple. I have no existing experience with it, but what is the existing time period for an individual or a company, for instance, to apply for these tax waivers, I guess?
Right. I was just reading the RSA. I don't have it committed to memory, as this is not really my thing. But I believe you have to request it by April 1st. And then there's also some other provision in the RSA in 260.
Follow up.
Follow up.
So this is a once a year application for the credit?
I believe so. Again, I'm not entirely sure. I know that there's this deadline of April 1st, and I think there is one other condition in the RSA.
Last follow-up, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Chairman. So right now, this new deadline would extend it for what time period? I don't see that here. For the waiver. In other words, let's say you miss your April 1st deadline, you make an application, say, oh, I missed April 1st, I messed up.
Right.
Is it 2 months later, 3 months later, 6 months later?
Yeah, I
What-
think
what
the
is it?
RSA is not specific about that. It just says that these filing deadlines may be waived by the commissioner for just cause. So I think at that point, it's up to the commissioner to decide whether to accept the application.
Thank you.
Representative Faulkner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just trying to understand a little bit more about the range of entities or people that might be able to take advantage of the tax waiver. You mentioned construction would include farmers, foresters. Would it include people who have diesel generators, for example? I'm just trying to understand how many people, how many different, and the range of entities that might be affected by this.
Yeah, I believe it does include that. Really, as long as the fuel is not used for on-road, I believe you can request the refund. Even off-road vehicles. So, if you have a four-wheeler and you're taking that out on trails, it's not on the roads and you can actually get a refund.
Seeing no further questions.
Just briefly,
Representative
thank
Juris,
you, Mr.
I'm gonna hold you off for 1 second. We have another gentleman that is going to speak on this bill, and I think perhaps he might be a little bit more in tuned in answering some of these questions. It just kind of dawned on me that we put you in a hot seat, Representative, and we have somebody lined up that probably is a little bit more expertise at this.
Probably, but I'm happy to take Representative Juris's question.
While you asked, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. How late is would you know how late is late?
Well, again, there's this April 1st deadline.
Okay.
And I believe, again, there's, I think, some other possibility, and perhaps Mr. Moses, my constituent, will be able to speak to that. It is in the RSA. I just don't have it committed to memory.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Representative Suter.
Thank you, sir. Do you have to have a business in order to apply for this, or can an individual, regular citizen who has John Deere tractor on his 10 acres and that's all that tractor is used for is his 10 acres, can he apply for this?
My understanding is that as long as you have not been using the fuel for on-road, you can apply. That's my understanding.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, thank you very much,
Thank you.
Representative. And I'd like to call, is this Mr. Robert Moses? who I feel is probably going to answer a few of our questions here after his testimony. Welcome to Public Works, sir.
Good morning, Robert Moses. I live in Lebanon, Ward 3. Mr. Representative Corman is our local representative. Our family owns and operates Britton Lumber Company in Bath, New Hampshire. We employ about 35 employees. And so in this, I'll tell you a little bit of our story. I can answer almost all of the questions that was asked. So we operate a number of, Caterpillar loaders, Celica forklifts, all sorts of off-road equipment. You can buy fuel, diesel fuel that is undyed. It's getting into the weeds, but undyed diesel fuel can be used both off-road and on-road. And then the dyed diesel fuel is untaxed, but you can only use that for off-road purposes. And so in our case, in 2023, when we had this issue, and I can tell a little bit more about that, we operate tractor trailer trucks as well that deliver chips from the sawmill to Berlin Biomass or to the Rygate biomass plant. And so we had to have undyed fuel on our facility because we're using it both on the road and we were using it off the road. And so what happened, and again, to answer some of the other questions, it is not just sawmills or, private businesses. It is, farmers and your local person that has a John Deere tractor that goes to Irving and, buys diesel, fuel. They can claim this refund on this Road Toll Bureau form, and it is due on April 1st of every year. In our unfortunate situation, I signed the tax return on January 15th, for, a refund of $4,218. So not an insignificant sum of money. And again, I'm not throwing our office manager, Heather, under the bus, but she's done this for 25 years. She misplaced the form on her desk. It didn't get mailed until May. And then the Road Toll Bureau, denied our request for a refund. Basically said there was no option for us to get a refund. However, said there have been exceptions made at the Hearings Bureau. And again, this is all under the Department of Safety. And so we applied to the Hearings Bureau. The hearings officer heard our case. We presented there were exceptions for somebody that was on maternity leave, and the owner didn't know that the person on maternity leave was filing these tax returns. An exception was granted. During the COVID period, the woman that prepared, and I think they were all women in this particular case, prepared the Road Toll Bureau refund, but because of remote work, it didn't get filed. And so the exceptions were granted for those late filed returns, and they were given the refunds. Makes common sense to me. The hearing officer in our case basically ruled that the previous hearing officers erred because the RSA provides no exceptions unless you are a political subdivision. And so they denied our case, and then they also said that nobody has any exception unless you're a political subdivision. So we appealed to the Superior Court. I mean, this is, not an inconsequential amount of money. We appealed to the Superior Court, and the Superior Court very quickly said it was unlawful and it was unfair that people other than political subdivisions didn't get the same bite of the apple once every 3 years. And so they ruled, he ruled in our favor. And then I had also offered that I was willing to pay a penalty. I mean, we filed late. I mean, we filed late. I mean, under Internal Revenue Service laws, I mean, you pay a penalty if you're late. I had offered that. The attorney for the Department of Motor Vehicles said, well, there's no provision in the RSA to assess a penalty to Britton Lumber Company. And the judge just said, well, refund them their money, but fix the law. And so that's why I am here today to advocate that basically farmers, Britain Lumber Company, other people that have off-road use of diesel fuel get the same bite of the apple that political subdivisions do just once every 3 years. If you're late filing, once every 3 years, you get a bite at the apple to claim your refund. And the state is not sort of unjustly, enriched because, somebody just misplaced an envelope and didn't get it mailed on time. So that's what the legislation that Representative Corman has proposed. I think it makes sense. Certainly, myself, our family supports this recommended change, and happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you, sir. Representative Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Moses, thank you for taking my question. What was the amount of money in question?
$4,218.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Suter.
Thank you, sir. So there is no like a drop dead date, say 30 days, 60 days? It's just going to be left up to the board to decide if
I think it's the commissioner.
the commissioner?
The commissioner decides what the timing was. I mean, Heather found the envelope like in May, but it was due, I think, by April 1st. So, but in theory, it could be 5 years from now, I guess, but maybe the commissioner wouldn't wouldn't consider that just cause at that point. I mean, I think also keep in mind that again, this is a little bit of speculation, that usually these claims are very, very small. I mean, we were unusual that, we had, tens of thousands of gallons of diesel fuel that, that we were using in our loaders, in our, in our forklifts and so forth. We've actually now switched back to dyed fuels. So now our claims for refund are $20, $30 for sort of gasoline that is used for off-road purposes. So we've switched back because we can't find CDL drivers, and so we've had to subcontract out, and so they're using their own gasoline or their own diesel fuel. So it's complicated. But in 2023 and a few years prior to that, these were the types of claims, that we were filing. And I mean, we feel bad that we filed late. I mean, we were late. I was willing to pay a penalty. But it doesn't feel right that the state should have collected our entire $4,200 just because of an inadvertent error, on our part.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Moses, for taking my question. So you mentioned what's a reasonable time period to file for these types of errors, and you mentioned out to 5 years. It struck me as that's not something that would be reasonable, that I would consider basically the filing year, you would either realize or not realize that you'd filed it. So I'm just asking you a general question. What do you think is reasonable, since you probably thought about this more than anybody in this room? Thank you.
I mean, I would think you would know within a year if you filed your claim or not. Certainly within a year. Because you would get to your next year's filing and say, oh, well, where's my return from last year, and see that I didn't do it, or I didn't file it, or I didn't get my refund that was owed. So I can't imagine anybody, it would go longer than a year, but.
Thank you.
Representative Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Moses, there was probably the follow-up question that I should have asked you. How much did you expend in legal fees to adjudicate this?
Well, we internally joke as a family that I'm 1 for 1 in representing ourselves.
Okay, good.
So, but again, I mean, I did consult with our attorney. That cost me $500, and the Superior Court fees were $300 or $400. So I think that, it cost us roughly $1,000. And I think, for most people, they're just not going to do that. I mean, we had enough at stake, and, we're of a reasonable size with, running a sawmill. It was a matter of principle too. I mean, it was just a matter of principle that it was unfair.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Thank Representative Newman. Slid right in. Am I dismissing him?
You have to wave the flag. Thank you. Could I just ask, when you file your request, you have to submit documentation also, just like on a tax return?
Yes, that was one of your questions. So yes, so every piece of equipment, every time a loader or forklift is filled up, that particular piece of equipment, a slip is given to the office manager, and when you file that tax return, every single piece of equipment, you document how much off-road fuel was used on that particular piece of equipment.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moses. No further questions. I'm going to close the public hearing on House Bill 1485. Now that you've got your engineering. It being 10:30-ish, and I always start almost exactly, I'm going to open up the public hearing on House Bill 1607 relative to the use and storage of road salt. And I'd like to welcome our primary sponsor, I was going to say Representative Rung. I got caught up in between Rosemary and Representative.
It's all those R's are so
All those
confusing.
Rs,
I
yeah,
know.
too early in the morning for R's.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and committee. For the record, my name is Representative Rosemary Rung. I represent Hillsborough District 12, which is the town of Merrimack. And I'm very happy to introduce House Bill 1607. What 1607 does is it would put into statute controls for the storage of road salt. DES for many years has had best practices on the storage of road salt. But as we know with anything, when practices are voluntary, we don't get as much compliance as we would if they are required. And the reason I bring this up now is the increased levels of sodium and chloride in drinking water has gotten to be an unhealthy level. In fact, in my town of Merrimack, we spent over $2 million to decommission one of our largest wells because of increased levels of chloride. And we had to drill a new well. And that doesn't include the health costs or the personal costs that people have experienced who have private wells. They would then have to install very expensive purification systems to remove salt. Now, many of them already have purification systems to remove PFAS, but those systems do not do anything to remove chloride from drinking water. And so there's a companion bill that was heard yesterday in Ways and Means that would also regulate salt by implementing a surcharge fees on bulk purchases. These would be the people that are supplying companies, landscape companies, or municipalities who buy salt in bulk. And just to kind of give you an idea of the expanse of this issue is that the state of New Hampshire uses 1 million tons of salt a year to de-ice our roads. And much of that is really unnecessary. For example, in Merrimack, because of the increased chloride in our water and just that we want to do the right thing, we have purchased several brine sprayer units that fit on the back of trucks. They use only a quarter of the salt that would be used if we just disperse salt from a spreader onto the roads. So there are ways that people can reduce the salt, and towns and companies can reduce salt that is needed to keep our roads safe in the winter. The reason this focuses on storage is that even without any distribution of salt on the roadway, there are some communities and some companies that just store salt outside. It may be on a dirt lot, and it's not covered. And so even without using the salt, it can contaminate our groundwater. Precipitation falls on that. It leaches through the soil into the groundwater, or it can be runoff. It can be the precipitation cause the salt to run off and to go into surface water. And I know there is a representative here from New Hampshire Lakes who can talk more about that. But just to get an idea about how serious this is and how necessary it is to put something in statute, you do have a letter from the DES Commissioner, Robert Scott, and I just want to highlight a couple sentences in the last paragraph of that letter. It says, New Hampshire DES has documented significant increases in salt contamination, especially in developed areas that contain more roadways and parking lots. And New Hampshire DES has recorded a 150% increase in the number of contaminated drinking water supply wells over the last 30 years. Chloride is a pollutant that is not removed by plants or stormwater control measures. Desalination is impractical and costly. New Hampshire DES and other states have identified instances of chloride contamination through improper storage of de-icing materials. So that is why I bring this bill forward, and I respectfully request that you recommend it for passage. And I would be happy to address any questions you have.
Thank you. Any questions? Representative Rockmore, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Rung. My question is about your understanding of current law. Under current law, could a smaller political subdivision, like could the town of Merrimack adopt a salt storage ordinance and adopt its own enforcement mechanism?
I'm not really sure on that, to be honest with you, Representative. Thank you for the question. I know Merrimack, we do have our salt storage, and we also have a combination of salt and sand that is housed in a building, and it's on an impervious subflooring, and it is covered, so it is protected from precipitation. But I think they could, but there would still be the question of there may be some municipalities that don't do that. And even though they wouldn't pass such an ordinance, doesn't remove the risk of that salt exposure to the environment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Representative Falone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. So who pays for this?
The municipality that would need to build that, or a landscape company, would need to cover the cost of that. And it probably could vary. It could be as simple as a lean-to that's on a concrete platform. The importance is that salt is protected from exposure to precipitation that would cause it to leach, and that it's on a surface that doesn't, that serves as a barrier for any leaching.
Follow?
Follow-up question?
Thank you very much. So there's no funding from the state?
DES is here. I'm gonna let them answer that. There may be grants available. I don't even know, maybe the Groundwater and Drinking Water Trust Fund, this might fall under their eligibility criteria, because it is a drinking water, groundwater, surface water protection measure.
Thank you.
Representative Suter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When it comes to storing the salt at a facility like we have in our little town of Mason, it's all covered in concrete walls and stuff. But you mentioned that there's some areas that don't do that. They just ground dump it and they have it just sitting exposed to the ground. What is the requirements for the storage facility for them to build in order to keep that contained? What you would say, well, that's how we contain it. Is there a requirement? Can it be just a tarp? Or does it have to be a building? Does it have to concrete floor? Does it have to have concrete sides? If it has drainage, where does the drainage goes? Is there any type of requirements for this?
Well, I deliberately, in drafting this bill, left a lot of those specifics up to administrative rules. So I would want the experts to determine, it may be a factor of the mass of the salt that's stored. So there's a lot of variables that I think need to be considered, and that, in my opinion, that's best done through administrative rules. You're welcome. Thank you for the question.
Representative Brown, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. As you know, I'm very interested, since I've worked with you on several other bills to make sure we protect our waters, but I've also worked with DES recently on some regulations, as you know, and one of my concerns about this bill, and I know DES is going to speak to this, so this will give him an opportunity to kind of get his thoughts together on this, but my concern is that this is too general, that it's not specific enough, so that it doesn't at least give minimum requirements for this, so that people could understand what's required. For instance, a tarp without, as Representative Suter mentioned, with no concrete barrier to the ground, that type of thing, in my opinion, wouldn't be adequate. And the other question is, are there any other chemicals that need to be added to this? Because I know a number of other states use other products to do the same thing to de-ice our highways. So those are the two questions I asked. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Representative, for the question. Kind of going back to the previous question that was asked, I'm leery about putting too much detail, let's say on the type of building or the type of protection, because there are variables. There may be a small landscape company. They might have something that would be as adequate than if they built a dedicated building for this. So that's why I think having it in administrative rules, which still have to have legislative oversight through JCLAR, I think is important. So we don't try to do a one size fits all, that we do leave the opportunity to look at where there may be some special circumstances. And as far as your second question goes, the real culprit here is chloride ions. And there can be, next week, could be some kind of new chloride salt that's introduced. So again, having that incorporated into the administrative rules and just as de-icing materials may address anything that comes up in the future that would be, that this bill would be obsolete in that regard. Thank you for the questions.
Representative Faulkner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It seems to me that if there ought to be a sort of a plate glass window thing, that you either meet the requirement or not. Is this legislation sufficient to allow the DES to set up a permit process, for example, so that if you have a permit, you're okay? if you have to get a permit in order to store salt at all? Or do we need to add something to this to allow, to provide that authority to create a permit process?
I'll defer to DES on that, but my opinion is that we don't even know how many people store salt at a certain tonnage. So I think this bill will help us capture that information. And I mean, maybe I'm too much of an optimist, but I think if we have something like this in regulation, people will comply with it without having to apply any enforcement action or tedious permitting process. I know some people may think that's wishful thinking, but I know as far as some of the regulations we've passed on cyanobacteria, people have been complying. They just didn't know more before, and they were having these poor practices. But once they know that, oh, that's in violation of law, they'll comply. So I'm thinking having this in statute will enable people to realize this is an issue and to take steps and to follow what DS has already identified as best practices in order to keep that salt storage safe from contaminating groundwater and surface water. I hope that answered your question.
Representative Bohm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking the question. It says no person. I think that needs to be expanded some. Also, how much? If, for example, if I buy bags of salt and I don't use it all, I got to store it somewhere. And the way this reads, it says I can't. So don't you think that needs to be expanded?
Well, I know it seems like that, but if you look at that, on line 5, it says used for snow and ice management on road parking lots and sidewalks. So, Representative, if you want to have your bag of salt on the top of your driveway and you're just going to be using it on your driveway, that would not be, a target of this legislation. This is really looking at organizations, municipalities that use a large amount of salt.
Representative Suter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. Along that lines, is there a certain tonnage or amount of salt that you're looking at that, say, for example, John's gardening service who does people's driveways, I have to store my salt and I get 10 tons a year. Is there a certain size or is there a limit? If I'm under 10 tons, I don't have to worry about storing it in the building. I'm over 10 tons, I do. Is there anything like that?
That would be included in the rules that DES would develop. And the reason why it's really hard to have hard and fast rules is storing a ton of road salt over an aquifer is going to be present much more of a risk than if it's someplace else. So, I don't want to try to evade the questions regarding specifics, but there's so many variables that really need to be addressed through rules and not through through statute. Thank you for the question.
Representative Foote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative. So in here it says DES will include self-reports, conducting inspections, and issue administrative orders and fines. Will there be a local administration municipality ordinance? Like, will the municipalities themselves have oversight of this, or is it strictly DES?
No, I don't anticipate that. I would expect this would just be under the environmental services.
Okay,
Thank you.
Representative Newman.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Under, on line 5, I'm glad you pointed that out. A road parking lot, does that mean like a paved surface, for example, a mall, a grocery store, whatever is a paved surface that they're maintaining an amount of de-icing material?
Yes, so it could be a public parking lot, it could be commercial parking lot, industrial parking lot. And those are typically services that are maintained either through, mostly through private companies. It could be a landscape company that does this to have business in the winter to hold them over. And then it could be like a municipal parking lot where the municipality, DPW, would maintain that. Yes.
Seeing no further questions, thank you for your testimony, Representative.
Okay, thank you.
I'd next like to call, and here we go, Andrea Lamoureux. Did I get close?
Lamoureux, very, very close.
I was close.
You were very close.
Close, okay.
Good morning. I'm Andrea Lamoureux, President and Policy Advocate of New Hampshire Lakes. New Hampshire Lakes, we're a statewide nonprofit organization. Our mission is to restore and preserve the health of New Hampshire's lakes. We represent about 150 lake associations, so community groups caring for their lake and watching over their lake, and a couple of thousand individuals. We are here today in support of this bill. And for all the reasons that Representative Rung mentioned, and then I wanted to focus in on just a couple points. So our lakes are getting saltier. They're getting more chloride. That is not good. Our lakes are meant to be fresh water. Particularly, one of the things Representative Rung alluded to is the connection between the increasing saltiness of our lakes and the potential for increasing cyanobacteria blooms in our lakes. And unfortunately, I'm sure many of you have heard about cyanobacteria blooms increasing in frequency and severity in our lakes. This is a bacteria that when the perfect bad conditions come together, it can bloom, and some forms can be toxic to public health, toxic to wildlife, and can result in people not using our lakes, which can of course impact water supply, can impact tourism, all of that. So increasing saltiness, what can happen is it can favor cyanobacteria by altering the food web, so altering the base of the food chain in our lakes, making lakes more favorable to the growth and reproduction of cyanobacteria, potentially salt-tolerant forms of cyanobacteria. Just responding to some of the discussion already today, lake associations we represent, community members have told us that this is an issue. They are seeing salt stored in not lake-friendly ways throughout their communities, in ways that it can run into wetlands, streams, and lakes. And funding. Representative Darby introduced a bill yesterday, 1810, which would create a salt, basically a fund, a mitigation fund with loan and grants, and potentially those loan and grants could be used by municipalities, state agencies, and businesses to implement best practices for salt storage. And finally, I would say to think about the economic argument. Clean and healthy lakes are very important to New Hampshire for an economic reason. And if our lakes become more cyanobacteria filled, more blooms, that may impact people coming here, spending their money, impact tourism, impact property values, impact jobs, and so on and so forth down the line. So thank you for this opportunity to comment. We are fully in support of this bill, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Representative Jack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for appearing. It seems to me there might be something in the nature of a drafting error. If you look at line 5 and 6, the words on-road parking lots and sidewalks don't really add anything to, if you were to take those words out, it would be clearer that you're not storing the chemicals on road parking lots and sidewalks. That's actually modifying used for snow and ice management on. So I wonder if we ought not delete those.
Thank you for that observation, and I would defer to Representative Rung, the prime sponsor, if that changes the intent at all, but I appreciate your careful review.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Lamoureux. The question I have is on the issue on the top of the second page that you mentioned, that this also contributes to conditions that may favor toxic cyanobacteria blooms. I, of course, like most of the people in the state, are concerned about that, but can you give me any more information that could support how that would work?
Great question. Thank you for the question, Representative Brown. Without getting too much into a deep dive into biology and chemistry, it's something called trophic cascade, and I'd be happy to follow up after this meeting with some resources. But essentially, it would increasing saltiness suppresses zooplankton growth in our lakes, so the base of the food chain, thus reducing competition on cyanobacteria. So it gives cyanobacteria an advantage to grow and bloom more. Cyanobacteria is a pretty amazing organism, actually. There's some thought out there that with increasing saltiness, it may work harder to pull nitrogen out of the air to grow even more. So some forms of cyanobacteria might be suited to kind of going into overdrive with increasing saltiness. And I'll follow up with some resources. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to call Mr. Steve Landry, somebody whose name I can pronounce. Mr. Steve Landry from New Hampshire DES.
Sorry, Andrea. Try that again.
There you go, sir.
Good morning, Chair Mills and members of the committee. My name is Steve Landry. I'm the supervisor of the Watershed Assistance Section within the Watershed Management Bureau at the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, and appreciate the opportunity to come and testify on House Bill 1607. Just to note, our agency doesn't take a position on this bill. However, we'd love to present some facts and comments relative to the testimony we heard this morning and some of the questions, hopefully, that I can address here briefly this morning. And just so you know, the Watershed Management Bureau is responsible for implementing many of the state's water quality monitoring and assessment programs. We're also fortunate enough to supervise in my section the New Hampshire Green Snow Pro commercial and municipal voluntary salt reduction program. And I'll touch on that a little bit more in detail so you know what that program does and what it doesn't do relative to this bill. But first of all, just some facts. As Andrea alluded to, we're fortunate in New Hampshire to have 1,000 lakes and ponds. We have nearly 19,000 river and stream miles in New Hampshire. We're truly blessed with a lot of clean, clear water that, as you all well can appreciate, it drives our economy, and it's the reason why many of us choose to live here. You also know that New Hampshire has first in the nation status, correct? Relative to the electoral process. Well, I'll add another one to that list. We were first in the nation to apply road salts, and that happened in 1938. So way to go, New Hampshire. We got a head start on chloride contamination as well. So think of that date, tuck that away in your mind, and then when you hear that number that Representative Rung shared with you of 1 million tons of salt applied annually, we've been doing that for a long, long time. And how did we get there? Well, if you think about 1 million tons, and our Assistant Water Division Director at the hearing yesterday for HB 1810 did some math, and he said if you need to visualize 1 million tons per year, just imagine the Empire State Building and fill it 2/3 full with salt. And imagine it's a big salt shaker. That's 1 million tons of salt that we're applying on parking lots, roads, sidewalks, and driveways every year in the state. And New Hampshire has 4 major salt application sectors that we have to address when we think about salt application. And I'll list them in order of magnitude so you understand where the salt's coming from. The first is the commercial sector. So these are your landscapers and snow and ice managers. They're putting down the most salt in the state because we literally have oceans of parking lots and large public spaces that are maintained by the commercial sector. Second place goes to our municipalities. We have over 200 municipalities that are applying salt in the state. That's the second largest loading sector for chlorides in New Hampshire. Third is New Hampshire DOT. They get most of the blame because they drive huge orange trucks on our major highways that most people see and complain about. However, they apply the third most amount of salt. And then behind them is our county complex infrastructure and then residents. So that's how salt's applied by sector in New Hampshire, and that's what we're trying to address when we think about that 1 million tons. The other thing you heard this morning from others is the topic of variables. You know, there's a lot of variables involved in snow and ice management. And something we struggle with at DES with the New Hampshire Green Snow Pro program is, first of all, it's voluntary. So we're not making anybody do it. They're volunteering to participate in the program. Secondly, we're targeting the 2 top highest by volume salt application sectors, commercial and municipal. We certify over 700 commercial salt applicators every year in the program. That's a really impressive number. It addresses 177 companies in New Hampshire. And they're volunteering to get trained in best practices for winter salt management. They demonstrate their proficiency and understanding how salt should be used, when it should be used, how much should be used. They pass a proficiency exam. Then they pay money to DES to get their annual certification. And every year they renew that. It expires every June 30. So these 700 plus individuals are engaged in that program. We like to think it's for the environment. However, commercial applicators are granted limited liability protection from slip and fall claims as long as they maintain their Green Snow Pro certification. That's the carrot. That's why they participate for the most part. Obviously, some of them care about the environment. They're landscapers. Salt ruins expensive landscaping that they plant in the summer, so they would like to put down less salt. But the fear is that they'll get sued. And this is why Green Snow Pro works, and that's why it's unique in the country. No one else has this. We do. And we're very proud of that. The thing that Green Snow Pro does not address is salt storage. We talk about it in the training when we train commercial applicators, when we train municipal applicators in handling salt. We talk about best practices for storing salt, but we don't inventory it. We don't know where it's happening other than anecdotal evidence. After the hearing yesterday, I took a cruise through Concord and I saw some great examples of salt storage and I saw some terrible ones. I saw blue tarps blowing in the wind loose next to a storm drain. That's bad. I saw others where they had brine tanks set up. They had stored coverage. They had concrete push blocks containing the salt. That's better. And then you can go see a $1 million facility that DOT maintains, and that's outstanding. So there's examples, and it spans the spectrum. And that is something, that is a piece of the Green Snow Pro puzzle that would be filled in basically by this legislation. We also recognize municipalities. Like I said, that program just got started with rules being adopted by our agency in 24. And right now we have 3 communities in the program, so it's a slow start, as it was for commercial entities back in 2013. But the number's growing as municipalities take advantage of Green Snow Pro and getting their crews certified. There are hundreds of salt storage sheds across the state, and although our agency can't point to a specific location and contamination problem, we can tell you that over 50% of our surface waters, there's over 50 surface waters, in New Hampshire that are now contaminated by chlorides. 10 years ago, that number was about 30. So the problem is accelerating. Groundwater wells in our aquifers have seen an increase in chloride contamination of 150% over the last 30 years. And many of you probably know DOT has a program to assist owners with contaminated wells to relocate or replace those if those wells are adjacent to state-managed highways. I guess the last thing that I would like to say is we understand at DES that we would be involved in rulemaking, and I think some of the questions about the details of this bill came up. We would target those then and come up with the details of proper salt storage. We do have best practices that we recommend for salt storage, but that's all they are best practices under the umbrella of a voluntary program at present. The other thing to consider is commercial and municipal and state and county operators would prefer to put down less salt because it saves money as long as you can keep the public safe. However, salt storage is sort of off the map, but we do need proper storage for that 1 million tons in New Hampshire to continue to protect water quality. The other thing that we've learned over the years is that chlorides is really, really tough to exacerbate. We don't have mechanisms to remove it. We don't have the ability to have it evaporate or withdraw it once it's in water, other than at a public water supply system. And I've heard individuals at major public well systems that have had their wells taken offline, they just said, dang, I wish this had been PFAS because we can treat for that and it's cheap. That's how they view chlorides. So I'm going to leave you with that sobering thought and a high note, and I would welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Representative Suter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. Do you have any data or any way of showing how much contamination is actually from storage facilities going into our water system and how much of it is actually just road runoff? Cause like in my little town of Mason, we're a roller coaster of hills and water runs down every one of them and they all run into creeks and they're all salted. So how much of this is actually coming from the storage facilities themselves?
Thank you for the question, Representative Suter. It's a great one, and it's a confounding one. The quick answer is no, the agency doesn't have specific data stations set up adjacent to salt storage sheds to give us those numbers. We have plenty of anecdotal experience from being in the field where you can do some visual observations, say, wow, look at that uncovered salt pile at this town next to this brook with that catch basin with that culvert, and the chloride is 6,000. It should be 200. That's probably a bad situation, but I don't have, 10 years of data. The other problem for us in the chloride tracking realm is winter. The winter severity index just wrecks any kind of data trends that you want to plot. And commercial applicators that we've talked to said when they arrive on a site to treat for a storm to determine how much salt to put down, they have to consider the shady side of a building, the sunny side of a building, what's coming in the next 2 hours. And someone quoted there's 66,000 variables that snow and ice managers deal with in New Hampshire because of the roller coaster effect, and you got lots of slopes. So while we don't have that answer, we would love to have the funding to do that kind of research and point the fingers accurately, but we're not there yet. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Cloutier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Mr. Landry. Has the technology, and I know we've dealt with similar road salt bills in the past, but is the technology available? Are we reducing the amount of do you have data on that? It wasn't very made clear to me in previous testimony that the amount of road salt over the past maybe 30, 40 years has been reduced due to the concerns that a lot of people have about road salt.
Excellent question and a timely one. And the answer to that is the data trends that we collect and look at DES are a bit discouraging, to be honest with you. And it's not that we're not gaining ground on commercial applicators putting down less salt because they're becoming better trained and calibrating equipment. And most importantly, firms are changing over to liquids from rock salt. So sodium chloride, calcium chloride, mag chloride, those are all the rock salt that you hear crunching under your feet when you're walking about in the winter. Like, oh, I feel so safe. Well, that salt's not doing anything because it's not in solution. So companies that are switching to liquid brine are saving up to 45% of their operating budgets when they switch to brine, and pair that with the Green Snow Pro training. That's the kind of anecdotal feedback we get. They say, wow, I've been in Green Snow Pro for 3 years now and my operating budget is 45% less. I'm purchasing less salt. I'm applying the right amount of salt now, not necessarily less. The problem with trying to get at that answer, Representative Cloutier, is again, the winter severity index and the types of winters we're having. If you remember a weekend or so ago, we had that late afternoon quick change in temperature. So we're getting more thaw, refreeze, thaw, freeze events. So operators that manage salt, especially in middle to southern New Hampshire, are applying more salt than ever because of the changing winter patterns. It's not fluffy snow every time, it's more ice events. So we're actually at a tipping point where we're starting to put down more salt. So the time has never been more important to get everyone applying salt to put it down in the proper amounts and switch to brine. Probably a longer detailed answer, but that's what we're facing.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer. Very informative.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Landry, for taking my question. So I've got a number of questions regarding the regulations that you're gonna put out. I'm not looking for specific answers, but I'm hoping that you can indicate that your thoughts and the thoughts that you've already done with the folks that have put before this bill would cover this. So my concern would be a minimum protection regulation. A lot of small impacts in areas make big problems for wells as well. Whether you'd consider minimum tonnage application in certain areas, I'm not looking for an answer yet, and how you would enforce this and what your thoughts are on the permitting of this process to at least track what we have and how these tracking what we have could possibly protect the more sensitive areas in the state by making sure that we regulate those areas more quickly. And the last one is, you know, you mentioned 3 targeted sections, and that the top 2 are the biggest contributors, but the state. So what are we doing for the state itself, since we have a little bit more control of the state itself, for encouraging this brine use that you say significantly impacts the salt that we go down by 45%, I believe you said?
Up to 45, yeah. That's from the commercial sector information we collect.
So that's enough for the public session. Maybe we can talk afterwards. Thank you.
Of course. And to address the first question about the rules, the rulemaking, the best approach to do that would be, I mean, I have ideas on it certainly, with our 10 years of work with the commercial and municipal sector and salt application. I think the best approach to that, if we got to that point under this bill being passed, would be to set up a subcommittee with our experts in the field, the commercial and municipal and state salt applicators, to see what's going to work. I think, as you can all appreciate, if our agency were to go through and do rulemaking and put on restrictions, regulations, and any kind of compliance issue, the best way to make it work is to find out what's going to work best for those sectors. We've found that with stormwater management and everything along those lines. So not really an answer or specifics, but that would be the approach I would want to see taken, is make that set of rules, criteria, and compliance have the greatest chance of success. Because we obviously, as an agency, don't want to get caught up in an endless loop of compliance and enforcement, because we do plenty of that on our other programs already. And then as far as the sector loading question you had, NHDOT may be the 3rd most volume contributor. However, they're the leader in changing over to liquids and brine. If you observe their activities, they do a fantastic job of pre-treating our highways before the storm arrives. If you ever approach those tolls ahead of a storm, it's usually very clear black hot top, and people are nervous, like, why isn't the state treating it? Well, they already have. That's why you can't see it. And you save money when you apply with brine, because you have no bounce and scatter of dry salt blowing off the road. The brine just soaks in and pre-treats that surface, and it prevents the ice bond. So DOT is a leader in that front already. So we would tap their experience to look for proper storage. And it's storage of both materials, you know, brine, liquids, and then the rock salt material as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One follow-up question, please.
One follow-up question.
So in the regulation section that you would be putting forward, can you see this as a staged approach? Over 4 years, 5 years, we would require this. Over the next 5 years, we require additional process to make sure that we get to where we need to be long-term? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. The follow-up question, Representative Brown. That sounds like a very logical and realistic approach to ease into this type of compliance program. And we could obviously target the sector we're working with most comfortably now and use that as an example and a lead example to then address the other sectors that are going to be more disparate, to hit the smaller communities in New Hampshire and not put unnecessary pressure on them to comply within 12 months or something. It's going to take a lot of time. It took a lot of time to get to where we are now relative to contamination of chlorides in our surface waters, and it'll take us, I think, a phased approach would be the most realistic way to have this be successful. Thank you.
One final question, Representative Rockmore, it's yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Landry. Is it reasonable to predict that if a business incurs new costs in building a better salt storage facility, that new cost could spur the business to switch over to a more environmentally friendly system like brine?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Representative Rockmore. Yeah, the short answer is yes, and we've seen examples of that. That would be a fantastic outcome. I think the other thing in the short term, before they would make a switch to, say, onboarding a liquids only management system, because that takes a lot of fleet alterations and very, very costly changes to their operating plan and budget. But if they were to at least retain their rock salt and not have it run off every time there's a storm event into a catch basin or a adjacent surface water or aquifer beneath that area, they would find cost savings because they're not losing product. So that's the first step that most people realize when they start implementing practices. Hey, we're not losing product, we're retaining it. So they save money there. But then that would be another carrot that we hope they would realize is like we should switch to liquids because A, it's more efficient and it is a cost incentive for them to make that change. The one thing I would say is that's the biggest barrier we hear from commercial and municipal sectors is the dollars it takes to do salt management properly. And that companion bill that's active right now, 1810, establishes that funding mechanism to make funding available to all sectors to achieve those goals.
Thank you very much, Mr. Landry, for your testimony. And at this point in time, I'm going to close the public hearing on House Bill 1607. Moving right along, at this point in time, I would like to open up the public hearing on House Bill 1785. Will do. Representative Horgan, you're up, please. On
Push the button.
push the button.
Oh, there it is.
There.
It's kind of confusing. They've got the red means on and the white means off, but this is not. These devices are not compliant with the MUTCD. Anyway, I'm Representative Timothy Horgan for Stratford County District 10, which is the town of Durham, off of exit 5 on the Spalding Turnpike. So this is HB 1785 requiring mileage-based exit numbers on Tier 1 highways. And this bill would bring New Hampshire in line with almost every other state by requiring numbering interstate and freeway exits by mileage rather than sequentially. So this has been mandated by the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices since 2009, and they've been commonplace since the 1980s. Our three next door neighbors, Maine, Massachusetts, Vermont, switched in the past few years to mileage-based numbers in the last few years with no dire consequences. And our state has been periodically applying for a waiver from the federal DOT to continue using our non-standard exit signs. The waivers have always been approved, but I still think that. But I think the mileage-based exit numbers are. I think that's better. It's what out-of-state voters expect to see anyway, so it makes it easier for them to get around, and that's basically mostly who's served by it. most of us with the roads we drive, like regularly, we kind of know where the exits are anyway. We don't even rely on the exit numbers that much to know where we are. This has been considered for a while. There's a project 40915, which has been included in several drafts of the 10-year highway plan. And actually, I have an excerpt from the very initial draft of the 10-year highway plan. Is floor 2 of page 2 of the written testimony. It's always been taken out during the gasset process. Governor Sununu was actively opposed to changing the exit numbers. For various reasons I personally didn't really agree with. Part of it was he seemed to somehow think our exit numbers are an iconic feature of the New Hampshire landscape, which, I like road signs as much as the next guy, but our exit numbers are not, in my opinion, an iconic feature of our landscape. It also somewhat quietly vanished under Governor Ayotte during the ongoing 10-year highway plan cycle. And I mentioned several recent developments, which makes it a good time to think about it. We just put in exit 4A between exits 4 and 5 on I-93. So if we switch to mileage-based exits instead of 4A, and 5, we'll have 12, 13, and 15, which I think is easier for the out-of-state motorists to sort out, because they're the people, as I said, they're the people who will most care about these exit numbers. And also, I live near the Spalding Turnpike. We recently eliminated exits 2 and 5. Exit 10 has never existed, and so so I think that would be better on the Spalding Turnpike. I personally, by the way, live off of exit 6, and actually I never really knew exactly which exit it was until I got interested in this topic. So before that, I didn't know exactly what number was on the exit from the Spalding to Route 4. And finally, just very recently, in the last year or so, they renumbered all the mileposts on New Hampshire 101 east of I-93. So they now start at 60 in Manchester and go up, I think, to 92 in Hampton. It used to be 40 miles higher, from 100 to 132. They did that, they did that because the old mileposts were incorrect. So, like, where the milepost 60 on I-90, New Hampshire 101 is in fact about 60 miles east, where 101 begins in the west side of the state. So, and actually those exits are funny. They go from 1 to 13, but the two most important exits, one to I-95, then the one at the end of the Tier 1 section, Route 101 and Route 1, don't have any numbers. Those are like the most heavily used exits, don't have numbers, and of course the big thing is the cost. So it's, in the preliminary draft of the 10-year highway plan, they gave a number of approximately $1.6 million. They had it down to the exact dollar, $1,595.37. The fiscal note gives a slightly higher cost, $2,274,100, 35% of which we paid with turnpike system funds. So I guess basically the turnpike system would have to kick in about 700. They would have to kick in the difference, about $700,000, and that's probably part of why Governor Ayotte took it out, because she's trying to avoid raising tolls on the turnpike system. So anyway, I urge you to pass HB 7085, or you can alternatively amend HB 2026 to include Project 4915, or you can do both. The effective date of this bill is 60 days after passage, but the exit numbers wouldn't have to be changed to calendar year 2038. And I chose that date because that's the end date of the next 10-year highway plan, the one that will be HB 2028, that the next Public Works Committee will be considering in 2 years' time. So I figured, be nice to get this on the docket in the current 10-year highway plan, but I know there's lots of difficulties in there. And actually, if you look at the back, you'll see what they were planning to do. If this plan goes forward, they would guess, do the preliminary engineering, decide exactly what the exit numbers are and so forth in 2031, and then they would put in the new signs in 2035. And that's in the context that they also have to do a certain amount of maintenance and replacement of the existing signs anyway every year. So that's my bill. Those of you who have been on the committee before have heard this before, and but I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Representative Horgan. Do we have any questions for the representative? Representative Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Representative Morgan.
Yeah.
So I guess the one simple question that I have is that I looked at the dollar amount, and you mentioned the budget and the issues that we have with the 10-year plan. And then you mentioned people from outer state, so it's in compliance with the federal regulation. What is it going to do for the taxpayers of New Hampshire who are going to fund this bill for $2.5 to $3 million?
Well, it will bring our roads into compliance with the standards that in not quite all 40, like about 47 of the other 48 states. New York hasn't switched over. Alaska doesn't have any numbers on their highway exits, but it's I mean, I think I drive in other states from time to time, especially Massachusetts, and I think it's better the way it is. And, everybody adjusted within a few months. So I think it makes things easier, well, even for in-state motorists. So it's, I think it creates a more friendly environment. And also we have to update and replace these signs every so often. So we may as well put in signs that actually match the standard that people are expecting to see. And it's obviously you can't really rely on 100% on the federal government doing what it's promised to do. There's a lot of flex there, but it's almost all federal money except for that relatively small amount of turnpike money. So, and I think if we pass this, that's not going to change the calculus on whether or not to raise the tolls too. But that's so I think this does a lot for the taxpayers. I mean, it's not like a huge thing. Most people probably don't even really pay much attention to these numbers unless you're kind of like interested in it, like I am. So I think So I think this does not hurt the taxpayers and everywhere. I think it's worth that $2.2 million. So.
Last follow-up, please.
Follow-up, please.
So based on what you just said, do you think the average taxpayer would care about having these signs changed?
I think some would, some wouldn't. It's kind of I think it's a small thing that makes the highways a little bit more user friendly. Anything we can do to make the highways more user friendly is a good thing. Both.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, thank you for your testimony, Representative Horgan. And I'd like to call up Mr. Lee Baronis. Welcome to Public Works, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. My name is Lee Baronis. I am the administrator of the Bureau of Traffic at New Hampshire DOT. I'm also a state traffic engineer and a sign geek in my free time. Among other things, our Bureau of Traffic is responsible for the design and maintenance of traffic signs on state-maintained roadways. That's the reason that I'm here to see you today. The department does not take a position on this bill, but I'm here to provide some basic information and to answer some questions. As Representative Horgan has expressed, this bill is a repeat from previous years and has the same project has been in the 10-year plan for several years. So we're revisiting this. I'm happy to go through history. Maybe if there are questions, I can go back to it and backtrack and cover some history. But I'll kind of forge ahead at this point. In essence, it will be renumbering the exits to match the mile markers that we have on the roadside. It's the only option that is now allowed by Federal Highway Administration for exit numbering. New Hampshire remains a holdout as not having started. There I believe New York might have started on some of its roadways. So we are the holdout. We don't necessarily get a waiver from Federal Highway. We're more or less a don't ask, don't tell situation where they're aware that we haven't changed it. They're aware that the legislation and executive office have not supported the change and recognize that it has not proceeded. My discussions with Federal Highway is that we are to have a plan ready so that if anything changes and we get the green light, we're ready to go without delay. So we've done some of that preliminary planning. In the meantime, it's we remain as we are. The merits, I think, of this change have been discussed. It provides consistency. 4 mile for exit numbering. It allows for the introduction of new exits without having to add suffix letters and so forth. I want to be clear that it doesn't necessarily eliminate all confusion. It can just redirect some confusion. We may have sequential numbering, but when you have multiple exits within a mile of each other, such as we have near some of our borders, think of Nashua on the Everett Turnpike, we'll have exits 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, if they're all within that area. So we kind of trade some confusion from one place to another, but it would be a consistent confusion with other states. My colleagues in other, in some of our neighboring states have talked about some of the challenges of renumbering exits and making them consistent, and we would go through those growing pains here in New Hampshire as well, with some unusual interchanges that we'd have to figure out how are we gonna number this. Like I said, we have no position on this. We will take it as it comes. We are, some of the concerns that I have about the bill is the fact that we have a 10-year plan, we have a GASSET process. That process is there to prioritize projects and take input from throughout the state. It's as you know, it's an elaborate process. We have some constrained fiscal issues with federal funding. So there are many projects that are not making the cut in this year's or in the current 10-year plan, the draft that's before the governor. And this project was removed as part of that. I'm not here to set priorities, but I'm just pointing out that the GASSET process allows for that. And so through legislation, that might bypass that process in some way. That's the choice that you make. The challenge would be is if this legislation proceeds and we are performing this project, we would have to find that funding somewhere. And that would either displace other projects in the federal program, ones that are in the 10-year plan that will have to get pushed further out, or we have to apply funds from other sources, state sources, betterment funds, probably not what we're considering. So that's just something to think about. Another element of the legislation, it excludes Interstate 393. At least the version that I saw. So I suspect that is because it was expected that those exits would not need to be renumbered, and so they were omitted from the legislation. The problem is the interchange with 393 and 93 is not numbered now and would need to be compliant with the system. So those exits would have to be applied. So I'd be concerned if we are specifically excluding 393, because that would kind of make an incomplete transition. The difference would be about 12 more ramps or about $100,000 I didn't run the exact numbers. And finally, the last thing I will mention is in codifying this legislation, and I think this is the same as legislation 2 years back. It's mentioned as amending RSA 265 to create a new section after 265, section 22. 265 is the rules of the road, and section 22 talks about motorist actions relative to pavement markings. I think my suggestion, and the agency would suggest looking at chapter 230, sometime near section 46, which is the section that discusses limited access highways and the design of such. Exit numbering applies to limited access highways, and I think that would be a more intuitive location for this legislation. I can talk about the fiscal note. I prepared that myself. There's a lot of exceptions to those the values that I came up with. We have seen an increase in the cost of signs in the last couple of years, which is probably where we're seeing the difference between what was in the 10-year plan draft and the fiscal note, which I prepared most recently. There are a few things that would be omitted, at least based on my assumptions, none of which are critical, but for your information, the pricing does not include the supplemental guide signs, which are normally an exit would have a 1 mile, half-mile action sign and a GORE sign. Sometimes there are additional signs in between that have numbers that would have to be addressed, but not all exits have the 1 mile, half-mile, and so forth. So it's a small wash. It wouldn't include the logo signs. Those are the blue signs that have the different business logos. That's handled by a outsourced contractor. Would not deal with any special sign design or manufacture, because we now have to put numbers on signs that didn't have numbers before. Also doesn't include some cross-reference signs like we've seen in Massachusetts, where they say old exit 12, for those who are still thinking like they used to. And then also not included is any public outreach in those estimates to explain the changes in numbering. So with that, I will conclude, and happy to take any questions.
Representative Faulkner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, in my understanding of the purpose of uniform traffic control markings and signs is largely based on safety. That if drivers have a consistent set of guidelines, signs, pavement markings, they're less likely to make mistakes. And so that's the justification for putting this rule in nationwide, is it not?
Yes, it's principally it's safety. The manual uniform traffic control devices does focus on safety, but it also provides for consistent motorist guidance, and the key is consistency and uniformity among the states. Well, we'll never get uniformity among the states. There's lots of different options, but this is one element. And so the issue of safety is what you want to do is have a motorist able to anticipate what they need to do. And so having clear signing, giving them adequate warning, that all helps prevent motorists from, keeping motorists from making last minute changes, swerving from the passing lane to the exit and things like that. So you don't want any surprises on the highway. So exit numbering contributes to that, in that, if you're going to exit 112 and you're now passing exit 3, you've got some time. But as you get closer, it's not just sequential. recognize, oh, I have 2 more exits, you know roughly how much more distance you have to cover to get to those 2 exits. So that does provide a safety aspect. I'd say it's probably more of a motorist guidance benefit in this case. In the history of this, there were 2 camps, sequential and mileage based, and they both moved in parallel for many, many years. And both had, strong arguments for and against their routine. And it was just finally reached a point where Federal Highway Administration had to pick one. And this, more states had the mileage-based numbering than sequential.
Oh. So you mentioned Federal Highway, but that's been done through AASHTO, which involves all the state highway officials across the country as well. Is that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. AASHTO is an organization of American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials, all 50 states and many other entities, districts, and in some cases, smaller entities have membership. They are not a regulatory organization, and so they provide consistency and guidance and advice and comment to Federal Highway for the rulemaking.
Thank you.
Representative Suter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. All modern vehicles anymore have GPS systems in them, pretty much. If you don't use it, you use it on your phone. I see people doing that all the time, driving down their phone with little maps on their phones through their back windshields. The question I have is, the data that goes into these phones are provided by the states for any exit numbers and highway numbers that's within the state. So if it's going to take a year or 5 years to implement this and change all the road signs, how often can you update the data in this? Because we're trying to stop confusion, but yet we're not going to be able to update the data on this until the project's done, which can be 5 to 6 years from now. So for 4 or 5 years, people are looking at exit 69 and they just drove past their exit.
Well,
how do you handle that?
Yeah, a couple of things there. First, we don't provide that data specifically to the GPS companies. They acquire that data through their systems. It's not that we aren't willing to, but they don't approach us, and there's many of them out there. Much of their data is accumulated through their through their collection of data from their motorists, as well as video. In an effort to minimize the period of confusion, we'll call it, the POC, what we proposed, and is similar to what some of the other states have done, is to apply overlay panels to the signs. Take one route at a time, complete that route as quickly as possible, and by just covering the numbers and changing them, you're able to accomplish that in a relatively short period, so that we move from old style to new style in as short of time as possible. It's no small feat. I was involved in the change in exit mile posts on Route 101, and just providing daily updates to all the emergency responders as a contractor made progress changing those mile markers is no small feat. It was it was a time-consuming challenge, but to make sure everyone's informed. Now, with the change in mileage-based exits, we would have, as part of the overlay panels, we would recommend having the cross-reference signs to remain, so that folks using their GPS would recognize the change in numbers.
Before I close this public hearing,
Mr. Chairman.
we'll have one last question. Representative Cloutier.
Okay, thank you. My understanding is, though, that we originally we were going to be mandated to make these changes, or the feds, this is talking about the feds, would take away some of our highway and turnpike funds. Is there still a penalty if we don't do it by such and such a date? And also, okay, go ahead. Answer that question first.
As far as I know, we are expected to comply with the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices. And we, in our adoption of that manual, the most current version, we are acknowledging that we are still using the old system. And part of the agreement to accept our adoption is that we have a plan for transition as soon as we're able to be authorized. Could they impose a penalty? Yes, they could.
All right. Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Follow up?
Could they give us additional money for implementing this? If we said pleaded, let's say, financial hardship or something, have you heard talk of the feds maybe helping us to pay for it through federal funds rather than us paying it on our own?
I have not heard of an offer of additional funds. New Hampshire DOT does its best to be ready to accept any extra funds that become available as funds are distributed each year to states. Some states don't use them all, can't commit to it. We have projects on the shelf to make use of that fund, those funds. So we might be able to pick up funds in that respect. The other place that we could potentially use funds would be through the Highway Safety Improvement Program, which, as you would expect, is highly sought as a source of funds for things like, roundabouts, improved intersections, and so forth. So I would be hard pressed to prioritize the exit numbers over, something like that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Baranis, Mr. Chair.
Before I close this public hearing, I would be a fool to not, seeing as I have the sign guru here, right here. This is completely off of HB 1785, but I had a request. Somebody thinks I'm the sign guru. How does a state liquor store go about getting a sign on 93 that says state liquor store, this exit? Do I tell them call you, or do I tell them call Steve?
First, to clarify, I'm a sign geek. I
Yeah.
prefer not to be sign guru.
Okay.
But that aside,
Understood.
Liquor store signing on the interstate is
Yes.
a challenging subject. As we know, we are faced with state rules and federal rules, and DOT has to figure out how to navigate between them, especially when they're in conflict. So we have a program called the Attractions Program, which is part of the logo signs, the blue signs, food, fuel, lodging, and then attractions.
Fuel.
So, yeah, some could argue that is a situation where DOT and the state can establish a policy that may or may not be consistent with the federal requirements on what they consider an attraction.
So who do I direct this to?
Well, the question would come to my office. I
See?
don't have a great answer.
Okay. But that's okay. I don't want to take up anybody else's time in this. If we're going to take up your time, but the liquor store is going to take up your time, not us.
Excellent.
Yeah. Any other further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony, sir. And at this time, I will close the public hearing on House Bill 1785. We will accept that one.
Okay.
And I
I'm wondering if anyone else sees the parsing ambiguity that I pointed out earlier. And if
Yeah,
we were
that's
going, if we were going to pass it, we would we would want to have an amendment.
five, the one that we just heard, I think just by the lack of funds that we can probably exec that one today. So all three or just 2 out of 3? All three? All three? All right, let's take about 15 minutes, be back here at noon, and we'll start execing that. All right? Thank you. All right, it being 12:05, I'm going to officially open up the executive session on HB 1485 relative to eligibility and fees for late refund requests of road tolls.
Mr. Chairman, I move inexpedient to legislate.
Road tolls.
Road tolls?
Road tolls.
I'm sorry. I apologize. Oh, boy, I apologize. May I retract and rephrase, Mr. Chairman?
I hadn't heard you in the first place.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, my wife says that to me all the time, by the way. Mr. Chairman, I move ought to pass House Bill 1485 with fiscal note.
Motion has been made. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Representative Cloutier seconds. Let's open this up for quick discussion. As I said, at first I was going to tank this bill because I thought it was applied to one person only. I thought there was already systems in place to handle it. And then just by the force of the gentleman's testimony, the fact that he went through all of that, he paid his own way. He offered to pay a fine if necessary. The fact that he went through all that, I think that even if it happens to one or two more people ever in the future, I think it would be necessary to have some sort of system in place. So I will support this. Representative Boyd.
And then Representative Faulkner, just to amplify your point, Mr. Chairman, I think this particular bill to be alliterative provides parity and clarity for our, but just believe
Well said. Yes.
provides parity and clarity to law so that people like Mr. Moses, and all the other subdivisions are on this play on the same playing field. So I'm happy to support this. Thank you.
Representative Faulkner.
I agree. I think this was a particularly well-presented argument by both Representative Corman and Mr. Moses. And I'd also like to point out that, I think here's a case where a real problem that faces the citizens of the state was brought to the attention of a representative who brought the bill. I think that being responsive to the needs of people out there, it's another big plus for this bill.
Representative Suter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with everything that's been said. There's only one concern that I do have with this. There is no timeline. So someone can come 5 years, 10 years, and I guess the committee makes a decision if they're okay to get their tax back. And how do we decide up what the fine is? That's the only little question I have. I don't have, it's kind of a concern. It's more, not a stopgap for me, just a concern.
Okay. Representative Jack.
That's handled by the commissioner, is authorized to grant this waiver for good cause shown. So it would be the hearing officers in the Department of Safety that would decide whether a request that was made 5 years later was for good cause shown or not.
That's covered by other sections of we only saw the part of the bill that they wanted. Just Representative Cloutier.
Okay, thank you. I'm in support of the bill because I think it's a pro-business bill, especially based on the prime sponsor's constituent who's in a business. So we're helping businesses a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. The only thing is, I think I was a little bit confused because it mentioned road toll, and I always get confused because road toll in statute means the gas tax. It has nothing to do with the turnpike system. So I think Representative Edgar and I have talked about it. I'm almost ready to file a bill to change every reference in state law from the road toll to gas tax. Let's be blunt and honest because it's too confusing with the turnpike system. But that's a story for another day. Thank you.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I agree with Representative Suter again today. My only concern about this is that, I don't think these applications for variance or whatever should go out 4 or 5 years or something. I think it should be in a reasonable time period, a year, 18 months, something like that, so that these things just don't continue on and then come back to affect the state in that regard.
I agree, but I don't want to take the time at this point in time. I don't think it's necessary to try and change the bill and change the procedure that the commissioner already has. It's as far as I'm concerned, based on the circumstances, if they want to tell somebody no after a month because they're a chronic offender, I'm fine with that. If they want to make an exception for somebody after 5 years that has a reason that they think is justified. So let's not
Okay,
Let's
I'm
not
good.
get into the details for them. Representative Newman.
I'm sorry. Representative Brown, had me think about something. So would if this passes, would Mr. Moses then have the ability to go back and possibly get his,
He got it back.
he got it, I'm sorry.
He got
My
it back.
mistake. I'm sorry.
Court gave it to him. So what we're trying to prevent is somebody had to have to go all the way to the court situation. Yes, Representative Rockmore.
Just to clarify the answer to your question, Representative Newman, I think anyone once every 3 years can apply for the refund.
But only if they're late.
Only if they're late. I'm going to ask clerk to call the roll, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The clerk votes aye. Representative Bohm.
Aye.
Representative Brown.
Aye.
Representative Louis is absent. Representative Suter.
Aye.
Representative Foote.
Yes.
Representative Cloutier.
Yes.
Representative Jack.
Yes.
Representative Edgar.
Aye.
Representative Faulkner.
Yes.
Representative Newman.
Yes.
Representative Vallone.
Yes.
Representative Juris.
Yes.
Representative Rockmore. Representative Fadolfi.
He's excused.
Representative Fadolfi is excused. Vice Chairman Bogert is absent. The chairman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, by a vote of 13 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, 3 not voting, House Bill 1485 with fiscal note passes. Ought to pass.
Executive session on House Bill 1485 is closed.
Mr. Chairman, are we going to put this on consent, though? Or-
Do we have any problems with putting this on consent? Consent it is. Let's move on to House Bill 1785.
Mr. Chairman, what was the count on that vote?
1303, Representative Faulkner.
We have 15 people here. Am I not miscounting?
People count.
3, 6, 9.
I'm sorry, I apologize. Thank you, Representative Faulkner. By a vote of 14 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, 3 not voting, House Bill 1485 FN passes. OTP. Thank you, Representative Faulkner.
At this time, I'd like to open up the executive session on House Bill 1785, requiring mileage-based exit numbers on Tier 1 highways.
Mr. Chairman, I would move House Bill 1785 with fiscal note OTP.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Which bill is this again?
1785.
Okay, this is requiring mileage-based exit numbers on Tier 1 highways ought to pass.
I'm sorry, ITL. God, I'm getting it all messed up.
Backwards there.
Mr. Chairman, I move ITL House Bill 1785 FN.
Okay, thank you for the clarification,
I
Representative.
apologize.
And I heard it too, and I thought. We have a motion, ITL. Do we have a second? Representative Suter seconds. And let's open it up for discussion. Representative Bohm?
It should be in the 10-year highway plan. I agree with, it should be numbered this way, but I remember like 40, 50 years ago, it was like that in Virginia, North Carolina. I mean, we're, like you said, we're last. But yeah, but it shouldn't be a separate bill.
Agreed. Anyone else? Representative
Chair.
Cloutier?
Yeah, I have a question of the chair. Is the 10-year plan, have we received it yet from Governor Ayotte as of today?
We have not yet received it from Governor Ayotte. We expect it by next Tuesday. That's why I'll discuss that at the end of this before we dismiss.
Okay, and a follow-up. Although
Yes.
I admire Representative Horrigan's persistence on this issue, and one time I know he and Representative Eaton were all strong advocates of this before our committee. But I feel if we could put it, if we're gonna do it, we should put it in the 10-year plan. And if we can get some extra money, that's why I made that question earlier. And I am concerned about us losing highway and turnpike funds if we don't do it. But it sounds like there's no penalty at the present time. So if we can make it some way we get money for it, I think it would be good to put it in the 10-year plan. But I think it's more appropriate to put this in the 10-year plan with all due respect to the Representative Horgan. Thank you.
Representative Jack.
Thank you. I'm pulling this number out of memory, but if I remember correctly, the shortfall in this year's 10-year plan is $400 million, and it is hard to justify an expenditure like this when you have that many unmet.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll have the clerk call the roll, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The clerk votes aye. Representative Bohm.
Yes.
Representative Brown.
Yes.
Representative Louis is absent. Representative Suter.
Aye, yes.
Representative Foote.
Yes.
Representative Cloutier.
Yes.
Representative Jack.
Yes.
Representative Edgar.
Aye.
Representative Faulkner. Representative Newman.
Yes.
Representative Vallone. Representative Juris.
No.
Representative Rockmore. Representative Bogert is absent. Representative Fidalfi is excused. The chairman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, by a vote of 13 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative, 3 not voting, House Bill 1785 with fiscal note ITL passes.
Do we care to put this on a consent calendar or not? Representative, thank you. Goes on the consent calendar. And the executive session for House Bill 1785 is now closed. You'll notice that all the chairs that used to be clerks give the clerk time. Yeah. Yeah.
And I want to say, Representative Boyd is doing a good job as a former clerk. It's a tough job being a committee clerk, believe me.
Well, this committee is very lucky that it has 3 qualified backup clerks, as far as I know, right? Yeah. Whereas we're a little short on vice chairs, so. We've got another vice chair. Yeah. That's true. At this time, I would like to open up the executive session on House Bill 1607 relative to the use and storage of road salt.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I think I was talking with some other members of the committee, have some concerns about this bill, but I think we need a little bit more information. I know there was a companion bill mentioned, 1810, that is being heard in another committee that could be a possible funding source. So, well, I like the bill in principle. I mean, I have some concerns about where we're going to get the money, as Representative Jack just mentioned, the deficit in the highway fund, and plus it might be a unconstitutional mandate on our municipalities and counties due to Article 28A if we did this, even though I think it's the right thing to do, but we'd have to give them some money, in my opinion. So, but I would like to do a little more research maybe before we exec this bill next week, if possible.
I didn't hear a motion. Representative Boyd.
Mr. Chairman, I would move House Bill 1607 with fiscal note to interim study.
Motion has been made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Representative Jack seconds it. Representative Boyd's free to speak.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I echo the ranking minority member's concern about wanting to get more data on this particular bill. I support the bill because of living in Merrimack and having seen firsthand the impact of road salt, permeating our surfaces and getting into lakes. Losing Natticook Lake in Merrimack which is a critical aquifer for 65% of the people that live in my community. Losing access to that water was to some extent was devastating. So there was a lot of anecdotal talk going back and forth, and I think moving into interim study, I've had some ex parte conversations in between with one member, and I think we'd like to take a whack at this and see if we can come up with some language that gets to the essence of the conversation that occurred today, and then maybe at some particular point during this session, maybe we've got something we can come back and replace the hard work that Representative Rung did putting this together and her co-sponsors, and maybe come up with a sensible solution that kind of brings together the challenge that this state is facing regarding the use of salt, but also, mitigating the public-private piece and the constitutional piece as well. So I would hope that you would encourage others to support the interim study motion. Thank you.
Representative Jack.
Just remind everyone that I brought up that parsing problem. I don't know if anyone else sees it, but the last thing you want to do is pass a bill where you know that there's part of the text where two judges might interpret it differently, if you can fix it. So if and when we come to passing this, I hope that'll be addressed.
Anyone else? Representative Bohm.
Yeah, it's interesting. At least 4 decades ago in Litchfield, we were building the issue came up in our town. And we said, yeah, we got to protect the ground. And we built a salt shed. I mean, I'm surprised that this is even coming up.
I have to agree. Is there any other discussion?
Just briefly, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The bill should probably have some language about assisting the local governments and businesses with help in converting maybe to brine or building covers and roundhouses for their
I agree wholeheartedly. I think the bill as it stands is not passable. I think there's way too many, to use the Representative Souter's analogy, there's way too many peaks and valleys in his town. I don't think this lends itself to a one size fits all, that salt sheds have to be this size or have this kind of material. I think everything is unique, and I don't even know. I think that with DES's help, that this can be turned into a bill that rather than the state dictating it, municipalities have to dictate what is best for their areas. They themselves know their own areas. So that's my point. I think this is a good bill, but not as it stands. It's going to need some kind of an amendment. Representative Brown.
I agree with you and the other speakers, Mr. Chairman. I think we should look at the companion bill. I agree that it's something we need to address. And I think that with the interim study committee, we can work on this and get this done.
The only thing I want to say about the companion bill, if it's the one I'm thinking of, it's Senator McConkey is involved with that, and that's the one about the cyanobacteria and trying to get funds for that can be used to mitigate almost any water problem. So it's not just for the salt runoff into the aquifers, it's for the lakes, the rivers, everything else, if that's the bill. And I don't know that it's truly a companion bill to this one, though. But it would put the funding there. Representative Faulkner.
Representative Rockmore.
Representative Rockmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2 points. I certainly agree that a one-size-fits-all solution doesn't work, but I do think the bill addresses that in asking DES to develop regulations that take into consideration the variables such as proximity to a waterway or elevation or quantity of salt. I don't think those variables are town-specific. I think they just have to do with the physics of how the salt is stored, and I think DES can address those variables. And second, I don't share Representative Jack's concern about the parsing. I think that the phrase on-road parking lots and sidewalks modifies snow and ice management. I think the statute is worded correctly, that the salt that this statute is concerned with is salt that is used for the purpose of snow and ice management on road parking lots and sidewalks.
Okay, well, we'll take that up when the time comes. We'll figure that out. Any other comments? Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The clerk votes aye. Representative Bohm.
Aye.
Representative Brown.
Aye.
Representative Louis is absent. Representative Suter.
Aye.
Representative Foot.
Yes.
Representative Cloutier.
Yes.
Representative Jack.
Yes.
Representative Edgar.
Aye.
Representative Faulkner. Yes. Representative Newman.
Yes.
Representative Valone.
No.
Representative Juris.
Yes.
Representative Rockmore.
Yes.
Representative Bogert is absent. Representative Fidalfi is excused. The chairman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, by a vote of 14 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative, 3 not voting. Hold on a second, I apologize. I checked the wrong box. I apologize, folks. By a vote of 13 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative, 3 not voting, House Bill 1607 with fiscal note is referred for interim study.
Do we want to put this on
Consent calendar. Any problems? No. Thank you, Representative Valone. Goes on the consent calendar. At this point, I will close the executive session on House Bill 1607. Next week, next Tuesday, we're going to have a full day, just for your warning. The morning session, we're going to take up our other 3 bills that we have. They are not early bills, so we've got plenty of time if we want to not exec them, but if they're simple enough, we'll do the same thing. We'll exec them before the afternoon. The afternoon is tentatively a public hearing on the House Bill 2026, which is the 10-year plan. That it's going to be listed as a public hearing, assuming that we get it from the governor by then. And by statute, she has to give it to us by the 15th. So it should be a public hearing. I can tell you that back in October, when we first got the bill, and I kind of briefed everybody, we had a $400 million shortfall on it. And a lot of projects were cut. Tons of projects were cut. The executive council seemed to ignore everything and decide that any of their pet projects could go back on there. I don't have the exact figure, but I do have the, perhaps, do you have it off the top of your head? The executive council added a tremendous more amount of projects and money that we don't have back into it. So I'll just tell you my direction, and I think the direction this committee ought to take is we're going to be looking at our original bill that we got from the Public Works, the $400 million shortfall. We're going to be looking hard at that. I don't want to add any more money that we don't have. As Representative Horrigan stated, one of the first things that went was there was actual money. We always have carried it in the 10-year plan. Should the feds ever step up and say, you've got to fix those signs tomorrow, we've always carried it in the 10-year plan. This year, the executive council took that money out. You're mistaken. Governor Ayotte did not take that out. The executive council took it out and assigned it to another one of their pet projects. So we're going to get a briefing from the DOT, the way the 10-year plan stands as it comes from Governor Ayotte, and I intend on taking the same tack that we took with the capital budget. Governor Ayotte gave us, what was it, $140 million, whatever it was, and we went to the treasurer and cut it down to 132 and actually delivered it at 125. So we're going to do what Public Works always does. We're going to band together. We don't care about the R or the D on your name. We're going to do what's right for the state, and that's the way I'm planning on taking next Tuesday. Representative Faulkner. I have no idea. I think all of that happened. I think all the public hearings that Gasset had all that input. I think that's where everybody went and chimed in. I don't think we're going to have a lot of people other than there'll be people that have their pet projects that always show up, or people that want additions.
We have a project that's in the plan now. Do they know that
There's been no further dropping of the plan since the initial DOT plan. There's been nothing but additions. There has been no further cuts on the plan. There's been nothing but additions that we don't have the money for, which we could have left in the plan in the first place. Any other questions? Yes,
Mr.
Mr.
Chair.
Cludier.
Yes, do you know what the deadline is for this committee to send the 10-year plan out to the full House?
Crossover, whatever crossover is.
Okay.
We got lots of time to work on it.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
This is my first year of getting one of these. Are we gonna get excerpts of this, or are we gonna get an actual, how are we gonna know everything? We'll get the actual book itself. Okay.
This is what it looked like when it went to the governor from the executive council. I didn't even bother reading it because until we get the right one from the governor, I'm not going to get my blood pressure.
So we're gonna get the actual book, not just excerpts of for our committee?
We'll get the entire book,
Okay, thank you.
and we'll get the DOT briefing. It'll be here they'll have slides. They'll walk us through every step. Yeah, we'll have summaries. We'll do it just like we did the capital budget. Take it a section at a time. Representative
Yeah,
Jay.
yeah, the book is an integral part of the bill. The bill says adopt the book.
Yeah, the bill,
And-
the bill,
and so,
bill just says
yeah.
adopt the book.
Right.
We're gonna make the
Yeah.
book work.
So that book is an integral part of what we pass.
And we're all dismissed. I've just been giving you information. Anybody has to go. I should have said that right away before I started.
So yeah,
See you next Tuesday.
next Tuesday, the 20th
Next
at
Tuesday,
10
the
a.m.
20th, at 10 o'clock here.
Thank you.
Maybe we'll have a pizza party. Who the hell knows? Of course, they probably. Some. Oh, is that?